Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really zeroing in on something that sounds pretty simple, but honestly, it offers almost immediate relief from that constant, low-grade stress of just living today. We're talking about managing the one resource we all seem to be losing track of every single day, our focused energy, and yeah, our time too. So we've got some sources here exploring this thing called the let them theory, which Mel Robbins really popularized. Think of it like an operating system for cutting down stress. Our goal today is to see how this whole framework might help you, our listener, reclaim some personal power from, well, everything happening out there.
Right. And that mission, it really hinges on unpacking this one core idea. The more you let other people live their lives, the better your life gets. And look, this isn't just about, being tolerant or nice. It's actually tactical. It's about conserving your energy. We're going to dissect how those tiny everyday things that bug us, those little annoyances, how they slowly, kind of sneakily drain our mental batteries and hopefully give you a tool to just interrupt that cycle, that reactive stress thing.
Okay, let's unpack that imagery the source uses. It's powerful. They describe modern life as death by 1,000 cuts. And these aren't like big dramatic events. They're these tiny, almost invisible stressors that just pile up all day long.
That analogy, it's spot on because the cuts are small,
Yeah,
almost invisible like you said, but they're constant,
right.
nonstop.
Exactly. Just think about it. The phone buzzing, again. The notifications just never end. Or that moment your internet buffers right when you need it most. Or you had a plan, right? Mentally set, and boom, it changes suddenly.
Oh, yeah. And it definitely extends to people too, doesn't it? Like the person walking incredibly slow right in front of you or someone cutting you off without signaling. That coworker who's like always 5 minutes late to the virtual meeting, making everyone else just sit there waiting. These are all things happening outside of you, things you have absolutely zero control over.
So why do these tiny things feel so significant? Why do they get under our skin? They feel big because they trigger something inside, right? That immediate jolt of frustration. You feel it.
And the analysis we looked at, it really highlights the cost of that jolt. It's huge. Every single time you let one of those uncontrollable things slow, internet, rude driver, whatever stress you out, you're spending emotional energy, like currency. And this reaction, this mental tax, that's what chips away at your personal power. You can't focus properly on your goals or be creative or make good decisions if you're busy internally fuming about how slow a cashier is or how inconsiderate some random person was.
Right. So the real task here, it seems, is shifting how we see it, our perspective. We need to pause and ask those tough questions the framework brings up. Like, really ask yourself, why does getting stuck in traffic ruin your mood for an hour? Why does hearing someone shouting into their phone way down the hall just irritate you so much? Or why does, say, a comment from a family member, maybe some unsolicited advice, why does it feel like this huge personal attack instead of just, well, like you said earlier, noise?
Well, we're kind of conditioned to react, aren't we? And those reactions, they feel justified in the moment. We feel like we should be mad about the slow Wi-Fi. We feel like we have a right to be frustrated by rudeness. But this theory, it forces you to see something crucial. The external thing, the event itself. It's neutral. It just is. It's your internal judgment, your story about it, and then the emotional flood that follows. And that's what actually causes the harm, the stress.
Okay, let's make this really concrete. The sources share this great little anecdote about being at a garden center. Picture this. You're in line, maybe 5 people deep, only 2 registers open. And the person at the front, they're moving so deliberately, painfully slow, checking every price tag, maybe asking questions. And you feel it starting, right? That agitation, maybe you feel a bit flushed, your muscles tense up. That internal clock is just screaming, this shouldn't take this long. The source mentions hearing that internal scanner sound beep, 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 and feeling that almost universal urge, to turn around to the person behind you, catch their eye, and do that little head shake, that silent eye roll that says, can you believe this incompetence?
Yes. And that shared eye roll, that moment of connection over the frustration, that's actually really key because that's the moment you decide to actively engage with the stressor. You're basically inviting the frustration in, saying, come on in, make yourself comfortable.
But here's where the shift happens in the story. Instead of doing the eye roll, the speaker sort of catches themselves. They hesitate. And this phrase pops into their head. Let them. Just let them.
Okay, and this is where we need to really look at the mechanics of it, what's happening there. The immediate effect of thinking, let them, isn't about suddenly not being annoyed or pretending the person isn't slow. It's not denial. It's about cutting off the emotional fuel line to the annoyance. It disrupts that automatic stress cycle.
Exactly. It didn't magically speed up the cashier. Of course not. The line still took maybe 10 extra minutes, but that simple mental switch let them. It shielded the speaker. It stopped those 10 minutes from turning into this big emotional drama that could sour their mood for the next couple of hours. The realization was kind of like, oh, okay, they're slow, and that's okay. It doesn't have to ruin my internal state.
And this is why it's so potent. Because, it's not some brand new self-help fad. This is tapping into some really ancient cognitive discipline. If we zoom out, it connects directly to Stoic philosophy, specifically that idea of the dichotomy of control. I mean, you can go way back to the Greek philosopher Epictetus. He basically taught it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This is a modern application of that core idea.
Okay, but I want to push back a little here because this is often where people get skeptical, right? Isn't saying let them just avoidance. Isn't it just bottling up legitimate frustration? Aren't you just suppressing how you really feel?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And the theory, or at least the sources we're looking at, are quite clear on this distinction. Avoidance is suppression. Suppression is like pretending you're not annoyed, pushing it down, which often makes it fester, right? It builds pressure internally. Let them, as presented here, isn't suppression. It's framed as active acceptance of reality. It means acknowledging the reality. Yes, this cashier is slow. Yes, this person is coughing. But simultaneously recognizing that this external fact doesn't automatically have to dictate your internal state right now. You're acknowledging it, but choosing not to let it hijack you. Your real power, the only power you truly have in these situations, lies solely in controlling your reaction, your internal response. When you willingly, even unconsciously, allow a slow driver or a loud talker or a canceled plan to dictate your emotional state, you're essentially making yourself a prisoner to those external things. You're handing over your very limited mental and emotional energy to, well, often trivial nonsense.
And the real danger here is that these reactions often feel so automatic, don't they? Almost physical. Like you feel that surge of anger or stress in your body. And that automatic, unexamined reaction, that's what often leads to things we regret later. The passive-aggressive comment, the snappy email, sending that text in the heat of the moment, all because we didn't pause. We didn't interrupt that default stress response. Okay, so to really put this idea through its paces, let's talk about the ultimate testing ground for uncontrollable variables. Let's apply the airport stress test.
Oh, absolutely. If you want a real-time laboratory for watching people lose their minds over things they can't control, just spend an hour at any busy airport. The sheer number of potential stressors hitting you simultaneously is, well, it's impressive in a way. You got the check-in lines, the security shuffle, the sudden flight delays flashing up on the board, the anxiety about lost luggage, people crowding the gate way too early, the battle for overhead bin space.
Yeah.
It's endless.
Yeah, tight connections.
Tight connections, exactly. And the airport chaos really drives home what the source calls a kind of fundamental law of human nature. You simply cannot control what other people say, think, or do. You can't control the weather. You can't control the airline's schedule or how fast the TSA agent decides to move. Any energy spent trying to control those external things is just wasted. It's guaranteed frustration. So your control, your focus has to shift entirely inward to what you say, think, and do. That's your only real domain of power.
Which brings us perfectly to the specific anecdote from the sources about being on a plane. So the speaker's on a cross-country flight, right? Needs to use the flight time productively, prepare for a big presentation coming up. But the person sitting directly behind them is coughing, and not just a little tickle. It's that deep, wet, hacking cough. Uncovered, repeatedly. Ugh. And the irritation starts building almost instantly. The speaker's mind just spins out, I cannot get sick right now. Not before this speech. This is so inconsiderate. Why isn't he covering his mouth? This is incredibly rude. That internal judgment just kicks in immediately, turning the coughing from just a sound into like a personal affront, a direct threat to the speaker's well-being and goals.
And that internal monologue perfectly captures the dilemma, doesn't it? That fork in the road. On one path, you have the temptation for passive aggression. The loud sighing, shifting dramatically in your seat, maybe shooting pointed glances back, which, let's be honest, usually only makes you feel more tense and awkward. The other path is the more direct, maybe more mature adult choice, making a polite request.
Right, and that's the path the speaker initially chose. They actually turned around, kept it calm, and made a perfectly reasonable request. Excuse me, sir, could you please cover your mouth when you cough? Okay, now here's the kicker. Here's where the let them theory really gets tested. The uncomfortable reality was the person kind of nodded, maybe mumbled an apology, and then just kept coughing openly. For the rest of the flight, the external situation didn't change.
Exactly. And this is the critical moment. This is where the rubber meets the road for actually implementing let them, making the polite request. That was an attempt to control an external variable, a reasonable attempt, but it failed.
Now, most people at this point, they'd probably double down on the frustration, right? I asked him nicely, and he's still doing it. How rude. Now I'm really angry. But the deeper lesson here is that after the request failed, the only effective option left, according to this theory, was to shift internally to, okay, I made a polite request. I do what I could within my zone of control. It didn't work. Now I have to just let him cough. Instead, what the source describes is that the speaker allowed that continued coughing, that failed request, to completely derail them. It hijacked their focus, ruined their mood, made it impossible to work. So the power wasn't lost when the man coughed initially. The power was truly lost when the speaker allowed the failure of their attempt to control him to continue dictating their own internal emotional state. The external event kept having a negative physical and mental impact because they refused to accept the final uncomfortable, uncontrollable reality of the situation.
Wow,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really profound point. You can't control the cougher, you can't control the traffic jam, you can't control the slow cashier, but you must control what you allow those uncontrollable things to do to your internal state, to your focus, to your energy.
And that really, for you listening, that's the core takeaway. In every single one of these small, frustrating moments, you have a choice. It feels automatic, but there is a microsecond of choice. You can allow the situation to deplete your precious resources, your time, your focus, your emotional energy, or you can choose to protect those vital assets by actively accepting what you simply cannot change in that moment. And that active acceptance, that mental tool, saying internally, maybe even forcefully, let them.
So what does this all boil down to for, tomorrow? For navigating the everyday, the challenge isn't about magically making the world less annoying or inefficient. Good luck with that, right? The real challenge, the real work, is building that mental muscle, the ability to interrupt your own automatic stress reaction when faced with things that honestly don't fundamentally matter to your bigger goals or your well-being. If the line is slow, okay, let them be slow. If someone posts something ridiculous online, fine. Let them be ridiculous. It doesn't have to steal your peace. So, all right, here's a final thought for you to maybe chew on this week, fill it in on all this. If managing these daily frustrations is really all about managing your own reaction and truly accepting deep down that you cannot control other adults, how does that change the way you might prepare for, let's say, an important conversation you know might be difficult or conflict heavy tomorrow? Is your preparation mostly about crafting the perfect arguments to force them to see things your way? Or is it actually, maybe solely, about preparing to manage your own response? Staying calm, staying focused, staying non-reactive no matter what unpredictable thing they might say or do. Something to think about. We'll catch you next time for the next deep dive.